Hello there, Lynx here, and we are playing Unnatural Urges! Of this time, we are supposedly switching to Rinka's perspective, so let us have a look. Rinka hadn't been to Higashikawa since her first disastrous outing, where she had anxiously clutched the back of Masaomi's kimono. That's all in the previous episode. It had been several months since then. Ooh. But the experience had stayed with her. When Rinka went to sleep at night, curled up on her futon beside Masaomi's, she often dreamt of her uncomfortable encounter with the villagers. That sucks. She saw them glaring at her as if it were superimposed upon her eyelids, some sort of grotesque tattoo. The men and women all stared, and the little children too. Some of the bystanders were wearing traditional Japanese clothes as Masaomi did, kimonos with patterns and long flattering sleeves, while some of them wore curious clothes Rinka was unfamiliar with, shirts and skirts and patterned dresses. Some of the women had straight hair, while others teased their hair into curls. Some of them wore their hair tied up, others down, and some of the men had strange lenses balanced on their noses, which magnified their eyes so they looked like insects. These men and women and children were all distinct, all unique, but they were united in one common aspect. They all, without any exceptions, glowered at Rinka. They all hated her, despite there now being a reason. They despised her. They wished she was dead. And late at night, when Rinka lay on her futon, their noxious whispers began to infiltrate her psyche, playing upon her anxieties like the strings of a shamisen. In her dreams, though they were more like nightmares, really, the villagers did more than just gope. They did more than stare, and they did much more than whisper. They shouted obscenities at Rinka, and they threw stones at her. They were cruel, even crueler than the shadowy creatures that dwelt up on the mountains, who were supposed to be Rinka's family. Damn. Rinka had already run away from one danger, but now she found herself embroiled in even more hatred. It felt as if she was destined to be disliked wherever she went. Rinka was anxious as the day passed. Days. Fearful that the villagers might band together to haul her out of Masaomi's home, where they would then descend upon her. Yeah, understandable. That's something I already mentioned that I would be afraid of. That might happen. I hope it won't. But the days passed, and Rinka's worst fears never did come to pass. The villagers left Rinka's worst fears never did Left Rinka and Masaomi alone. They might have been vicious in Rinka's dreams, with sharp eyes and sharp teeth, spouting sharp words from their cruel and cutting tongues, but in actuality it seemed like they were cowards. They kept their distance, afraid perhaps that Rinka would harm them. Well, that suited Rinka just fine. She had no real desire to spend any time with the villagers. She was young, but her sense of self-preservation was developed enough that she knew to avoid danger. But she did worry about Masaomi. She did not like that he was being ostracized because of her, and Rinka was sensible enough to know that he was being ostracized. Her presence was making his life more difficult, yet Masaomi never said that. Rinka was unsure whether he even thought it. He was in such a fair spirits. Perhaps she was worrying over nothing? Masaomi seemed happy enough as he taught Rinka how to read, how to write. And maybe that was enough of a reward for him? Perhaps, yeah. I mean, in a way, he's reliving his best years this way. Masaomi lived a simple life, and he seemed not to want for much else. Rinka tried to take solace in this as the days unwound about her slowly and lackadaisically. It was easier to forget about the villagers and about how they had scorned her when she was with Masaomi. He made everything more bearable. Rinka rather enjoyed her lessons with him. It was something to do, and Masaomi's eyes always lit up as he instructed her. It seemed like he had a passion for being a teacher. Apparently it had once been his profession. Yes, we learned that. Indeed. But I guess from her perspective, we know that now. He had taught at a local school in Higashikawa for some years. More than 3 decades. Wow. Nice. More than 3 decades in one profession, that's in a way admirable. Before his poor health and forced him to resign early. The longest I've been in the same profession was 3 years. Anyway, it seemed as though Masaomi was going back to his roots. Teaching was Masaomi's passion and he clearly excelled at it. Rinka thought that the children who had been taught by Masaomi must have been very fortunate indeed. And to be fair, she is now then, right? Right? She's considering that, right? He was kind, patient, and he never lost his temper. Wow, like the opposite of Polish teachers. Lessons with Masaomi did not feel like a chore. They were fun, for not even Rinka could always be diligent and dutiful student. Not even Masaomi, meanwhile, could always play the role of Rinka's educator. The weather began to cool, and as it did, Masaomi's joints began to play him up. He spent more time sleeping, leaving Rinka at her own devices. Rinka did not much mind this, however. She quite liked padding through Masaomi's house in the early hours of the morning, as the faint autumn sunlight spilled in through the windows. Man, she's such a cutie pie. What is wrong with those villagers? I mean, how can you hate on such a cutie pie? It was during one such quiet morning when Masaomi was asleep that Rinka made an acquaintance quite by accident. What? She was sitting on the veranda looking out over the garden, one of yesterday's rice balls in her hand. Masaomi had made a batch of them with Rinka's help, all filled with kombu. There had been several rice balls left over, and Rinka had liberated one of them from the fridge that morning. The fridge was an object of fascination to Rinka, much like the other appliances in Masaomi's kitchen, the boxy rice cooker and the gas stove with the hobs. Makes sense. Rinka had never seen anything like them in the mountains. She had been a bit afraid of the fridge. At first, it had hummed like a malevolent monster, but now she knew how convenient it was. She was thankful for it. Yeah. It sure is. I mean, as long as it's not something that requires Wi-Fi, then yeah, it's a convenient tool. Otherwise, don't buy fridges like, you know, that requires Wi-Fi and so on. Just don't. It's a stupid thing to do. Back then there was not even such a thing. Now that I think, well, it's for them in their years. Also back then they used to make fridges good. Fridges that were supposed to last you basically a lifetime. Kind of. It was thanks to the fridge that she had been able to sip cool, refreshing barley tea all summer. Masaomi had kept it chilled especially for her, just as he had chilled the rice balls. Rinka picked at her rice ball, always swinging her slender legs to and fro. It was early autumn, and the leaves had yet to fall off the trees. The hedgerows looked healthy enough, and there were even a few flowers poking through the grass, alongside a slew of weeds. Masaomi's garden had never been the neatest, but had rather gone to seed over the summer. Masaomi was often tired to take care of his garden himself, and none of the villagers would do it for him. In the past, he had relied on the help of the locals to weed his garden several times a year, but they all avoided him now. Rinka thought this was an awful shame, especially when Masaomi's spacious garden boasted so many trees and so many flowers. Rinka was beginning to wonder whether she shouldn't weed the garden herself. She was more spry than Masaomi and could have managed it easily when a curious rustling from one of the hedges made her pause. She frowned. What was that? Rinka wondered whether she should creep closer to sate her curiosity, but fear held her back. What if it was one of the villagers? Had they come to harass her? Rinka thought this unlikely, but all the same. She kept her eyes trained upon the hedge, her brow furrowed. Her rice bowl rested upon her lap, only half eaten, scattering her patterned kimono with grains of rice. She stared inwardly, her red eyes wide when... Oh! Rinka saw it. A little head had poked out the hedge, a head which was preceded by a less than little body? The head was topped with two triangular ears. Is it a cat? And far from the rear of the quadruped creature, Rinka could see a long white tail. The creature was white all over, like a snowball, and very fluffy, so much so it looked a bit like a cotton ball. Rinka recognized the creature as a cat, for she had little experience with them. The only wild animals Rinka had seen growing up deep in the mountains were rabbits and voles, and the occasional deer. She knew of cats because of Masaomi had told her about them, but she had never seen one before, not as at such a close quarters. She might have passed a few strays during her visit to Higashikawa, but she had been so anxious she hadn't been able to properly appreciate her surroundings. Rinka was doing nothing more strenuous at the present, however, when sitting in Masaomi's garden, which gave her ample opportunity to appreciate the cat. It really was a sweet thing, even if it was a bit on the large side. Its belly was rotund enough that it almost dragged along the ground as it approached, its legs too short and squat to properly support it. Let's go! So, apparently the one little part for the PC has started its route to me. I did order it at night, to be fair. It's nothing like special for just a fun. Come on. Rinka knew not who the cat belonged to, but at least one thing was plain. It had been well loved. And definitely overfed, I guess. It could have been a stray, it was too portly, it must have been out for a stroll, and it seemed the cat had hit the jackpot. Its eyes, they were a light pale blue, zoned in on the rice ball in Rinka's lap. Then it darted forth, for maybe dart was not quite the right word. The cat was too big to dart. Instead it ambled, its blue eyes bright and its tail quivering with excitement. Rinka had half expected the cat to draw away from her, hissing. Her last trip to Higashikawa had stayed with her. But the cat did not seem to possess any silly prejudices, not like the villagers. True. It saw that Rinka was alone, and it saw that she was not a threat. It saw too the rice ball in her lap, and it needed no other reason to approach her. The cat purred as it padded towards Rinka. It hopped up onto the veranda in a surprisingly fluid manner, given its girth, then butted its head gently against Rinka's arm. Rinka giggled a little, enchanted by the white fluffy creature, and said, "Why, hello there! It's nice to meet you too! Do you want to be my friend?" That was a terrible cat sound. The cat meowed in response, then gave Rinka's arm another nudge. Oh, it was supposed to be meow, okay. Meow! Rinka giggled. She knew perfectly well what the cat wanted, even if it couldn't directly communicate with her. She broke off a piece of her rice bowl, then held it out to the cat. "Do you want this?" The cat purred more excitedly this time, and extended a paw, reaching out for the rice bowl. Rinka was too fast, however, she had preempted this and drew back the sleeve of her kimono fluttering. "Not so fast!" Rinka chided gently in the same sort of voice Masaomi used on her when she made a mistake with her reading. "I don't think
think you need more feeding. You're already so big. You're at no risk of going hungry.
The cat purred once more, for it sounded malcontented. Had she upset it? Perhaps it disliked having the rice bowl held out to it, only to have the prize swiped away. It must have seemed rather unfair. Rinka watched the cat closely. It nudged her arm again, purring once more as it did, more sweetly this time, in a cloying sort of way. It must have been trying to endear Rinka to it. The cat was being awfully transparent, but Rinka appreciated how straightforward it was being. The cat was nothing like most humans. It at least was honest and upfront with its wants. Sure. Rinka supposed she could relate to that. She wasn't a human either. She thought humans very strange, what with their inflexible manners and their false smiles. You clearly have not been to Poland then. We don't do false smiles. Well, I guess unless you work in some corporation, then it's a different story, but otherwise. Humans could not be trusted, Masaomi accepted, but maybe she could trust this cat. Yeah, humans can be trusted, true. She had already given up on making friends with any children her own age, but perhaps she could be friends with this cat, even if it did belong to somebody else.
Oh, alright then. You've convinced me. I should be doing this. Masaomi says I should eat more myself. But fine. You're cute, so I'll allow it. I hope you like the rice.
Rinka held the rice bowl back to the cat, who instantly perked up. She, Rinka, had decided that the cat was a girl, for she had conducted a thorough examination. Meowed again, more sweetly than before, and accepted Rinka's offering from her outstretched fingers. The cat did not shrink away from Rinka's claws. Oh, you can't call those claws, come on. They're hands. She didn't look at all afraid. Instead, she ate neatly and sweetly from Rinka's hand, her pink tongue clapping against Rinka's fingers, so she giggled. Once the cat had finished, Rinka rested her hand upon the cat's head in much the same way Masaomi did with her. She was curious whether the cat would finally recoil, having accomplished her goal, but the cat did not. Instead, she remained, nuzzling her cheek against Rinka's palm. Softly, Rinka smiled. Then in a gentle voice she said,
Yes, that's right. You're such a good girl. Do you know who's a good girl? That's right, it's you.
Rinka giggled. She had eaten a rabbit before and deer, but she had no desire to make this cat a meal. The cat was much too sweet and she really was soft. Yeah, I can understand that. I also don't see a reason to eat cats. Same with dogs, really. I think I had rabbit once in my life. It was not good. At the time, at least. I don't think I've ever eaten deer though. I need to find a place. She was so white and downy, it made Rinka wonder.
I know your name, and I doubt you can tell me. So I call you Snowy. Do you like that? I'm glad.
Rinka smiled, feeling rather soothed by her new friend. She knew Snowy must have belonged to one of the Higashikawa's villagers, but she didn't want to dwell upon that. For the present at least, Snowy was her friend. She belonged to Rinka. And as Snowy butted her head against Rinka's hand, Rinka was afforded a degree of happiness, the likes of which she'd never broken before. Broken? Where did I get the broken? Where did I take the broken from? She'd never before known. Where did I take the broken from?
Masaomi's perspective.
I wonder if he's seen the scene with the cat. It was on a quiet spring morning, a little over a year after Rinka had started to live under Masaomi's roof, that an unexpected commotion occurred. Masaomi had been sitting in the living room flipping through a hefty tome of folk tales. For Masaomi typically preferred reading murder mysteries, he had taken to pouring through stories from the Edo period about demons, particularly the fierce demons which had populated Mount Oe. After taking Rinka, Masaomi had wanted to expand his admittedly limited knowledge on demons in the hopes he could better understand her. Could have asked. Masaomi wasn't having much luck with the stories he had been perusing, however. The demons in the Oeyama and Maki were all wicked flesh eaters who acted without any mercy, rending humans into bloody chunks with their teeth and claws. Rinka wasn't at all like that. She was so dissimilar to the demons of legend, it was perplexing. For Masaomi was pleased, of course, that Rinka had never tried to tear out his intestines. They introduced a brand new challenge to living alongside her. Rinka, meanwhile, was outdoors. It was a warm day and she always enjoyed wandering about in the garden, making crowns with the flowers and watching the carp as they scudded about in the ornamental pond. Everything was calm. It was quiet and peaceful. Dust motes dancing gently in the sunlight which shone through the windows. It wasn't yet midday, and the sun had yet to reach the apex of the sky. Though it was warm, it was pleasantly so, not unbearable as the muggy haze of summer often was. Masaomi was content enough to relax, occasionally setting his book aside to sip from a cup of refreshing barley tea which was sat by his side. But a scream from the garden made him start. What in the world was going on? Uh-oh. Masaomi cast his novel to one side, no longer caring about the culprit of the complicated closed room murder, and rose to his feet as quickly as he was able. Masaomi had to use his cane to support himself. His legs were trembling so badly, but his knees meanwhile were aching. Masaomi had dealt with pain in his joints for several years already, for this pain often dulled during warmer weather. It was a worrying sign that his leg still ached so much in the early spring, when the trees were festooned with cherry blossoms and the sun had begun to chase away the winter chill. But Masaomi tried to push the concerns about his ailing body to one side. His own discomfort didn't matter. He was far more concerned with Rinka. What had made her scream? Masaomi hobbled through his house, wincing every time he set his left foot down the floor. He left the living room where he had been sitting and reached the veranda, dragging his left leg behind him, his wooden cane striking the floorboards with a series of dull tugs. Straining his eyes against the sun, it was a warm, bright day, the sky peerless powdery blue. Masaomi looked out into his garden. Then he gasped. Rinka was slumped on the ground, her legs splayed. It looked as though she had fallen while at play or...
What's wrong with you? Why don't you get up? Aren't you meant to be monster? You shouldn't try and hit me back. Or at least try and defend yourself.
She looks kinda like Ruko.
You're making me look like the bad guy here.
Maybe she had been pushed. Rinka was alone in the garden, as was usually the case. A young girl was standing in front of her, one with dark hair which was cut into a straight severe fringe. The girl was wearing a kimono which was rather luxurious. She must have come from a well-to-do family, but it was dirty about the knees. Her hair too was messy, a few loose twigs and leaves twinged through it. There was a cut on her face, and a few more cuts on her hands, but the girl didn't seem to care. The cuts were all superficial in the case, none of them were bleeding. She looked as though she had been dragged through a hedge backwards, but maybe there was an inaccurate reading of the situation. Had she crawled through the hedge instead? Masaomi took stock of the scene for a few minutes before striding forth as best he could, wincing as he descended from the veranda into the garden. He approached Rinka, who was shaking, and standing before her, he said,
What in the world is going on here? Masaomi!
Rinka stared up at her surrogate father, her eyes wide. Sniffling, she got to her feet. At least she wasn't so badly injured she could no longer stand, then hid herself behind his back. Her fingers curled against the fabric of Masaomi's kimono and softly she mumbled,
I was just playing when this girl appeared. She came through the hedge.
Masaomi raised an eyebrow while Rinka nodded. Well, that solves one mystery.
And what happened next? Did she do anything to you?
She said she wanted to play with me and then...
Oh!
And then?
Masaomi tried to coax an answer from Rinka, but it was impossible. She had gone mute, as she often did when she was anxious, her closed fingers curling even more tightly about his kimono. Masaomi could see that getting the full story from Rinka would be like trying to siphon blood from a stone, but what about the girl in his garden? Maybe she would be a little more forthcoming.
Now, who do we have here? Who are you, and what are you doing in my garden?
Her harumphed her hands on her hips and said in an arch voice which didn't suit how very small she was.
My name is Canon, if you wanna know, but why are you talking to me like that? You're making it sound like I did something wrong, when I didn't. I swear I didn't.
I mean, technically you entered his property, but... you know.
I didn't do nothing.
That should be I didn't do anything if you want to be pedantic.
Yeah, tell that to English people, by the way. Or should I say British people.
And my, somebody sounds defensive. Are you sure you've done nothing wrong?
Yes, I'm sure. I really didn't do nothing.
Anything.
I came here because everybody told me not to. Misuzo said the demon lived here and I should keep my distance.
Misuzu.
Did she now?
Masaomi sighed. He knew that the villagers whispered about him behind his back, but there was something depressing about being told it point blank by a young girl with a dirty kimono and leaves in her hair. Honestly, I think it's the best way to be told that. If you want to say something, that say it point blank, don't whisper behind the back. Yeah?
Do people talk about me often?
Hey.
Canon pondered this for a few moments. She placed her hand beneath her chin, her brow furrowed in thought, and said,
Not that much, I guess. Most people pretend you don't exist, but when they do, they get real weird about it. I was asking about your house, cause it's so nice and big, and it has such a huge garden too, but my star was all, No, Canon, you can't go there, you won't be safe. Well, I'm not gonna let anybody tell me what to do. I want to see if a demon really lives here with my own eyes. I was really curious.
Here, Canon stopped and accused her finger in Rinka's direction.
But she's not nothing like what I imagine.
Anything!
She was just playing in the garden, picking flowers. What's so demonic about that?
I think you might be laboring under a few misapprehensions here, miss.
Masaomi looked a young girl over. He thought he recognized her. Didn't she live with her parents in the village shrine?
Wakabayashi, is it?
That's right.
The girl, Wakabayashi Canon, scowled, then said,
I don't believe this. I went through so much effort to come here. I had to give Misuzu and Misai a sleep, and this girl ain't anything like what I thought she'd be. She's not scary at all. Ask her if she'd catch a rabbit for me and like bite its head off or something, but she refused. How boring is that? I didn't want to fall. I don't want to hurt anybody. Please, give me a break. What kind of demon are you if you can't even manage that much? Some of the boys from the village throw stones at stray cats for fun, and they ain't monsters.
well... I'll be honest, I would label them as monsters.
At least I don't think they are. They're just normal, dirty, nasty little boys.
Someone should throw some stones at them, to be honest.
Why would they do that for? Do what? Throwing stones at cats, that sounds mean. I don't know. I think they do it because they're bored. There ain't much to do around here.
I mean, if they're bored, they might become my targets for stone throwing. How does that sound?
That's why I wanted to see you, but this has been a total letdown. I'm sorry? You should be... You didn't even do anything when I pushed you over. You just started crying. What's up with that, huh?
Well, now, I know how Rinka got that bruise, I suppose.
Masaomi gave the top of Rinka's head a reassuring ruffle, then looked back at Kanon. That's also nice clothing. And I like the ribbon.
Now, Miss Cannon. You're probably aware of this already at this point, but I feel like I should make one thing plain. Rinka here might be a demon, but she's no different from an ordinary little girl. She's very kind, and she's never done anything to hurt anybody. She doesn't even like to crush spiders. She always asks me to catch them and let them outside when she finds them in the bathtub. She thinks they are scary.
Huh? Well, I get that. I don't like spiders too much either.
They are quite unsettling, aren't they? With all of their long legs.
And all of their eyes.
Kanon shuddered.
My mom always has to take care of the spiders when we find them in the bathtub.
How do you find spiders? I don't think I've ever seen a spider in a bathtub, to be honest. On the walls, obviously. On the floor, yes. On the ceiling, yes. Window, yes. Monitor, yes. Desk, yes. Bathtub, never. Anyway.
My dad and my sisters don't like him. I wonder if that means my mother's even stronger than a demon?
Well, I wouldn't know.
I mean, technically, you could maybe say that. I mean, he mentioned they live in a shrine, so I guess we could kind of assume, in a way, that she might be a shrine maiden. And as far as I'm concerned, shrine maidens were people who would sort of fight off evil spirits, demons as well, so... I mean, you could say that. Right?
Well, I wouldn't know. I'd hate to make any unflattering remarks about your mother, but mothers can be quite vicious. Especially when they think their children are in danger. My own mother was a slip of a woman, but she could be rather frightening when she wanted to be.
My mom's pretty scary too. She's always shouting at everyone. Sometimes I don't think anything scares her. Apart from demons, I guess. She told me not to come here too.
Was she adamant about that?
I don't know what the word means, but she was totally on Misuzo's side when I talked about coming here. She said no good comes from talking to demons, but I don't get it. My mom was making out that Rinka's really scary, but I think she's way scarier. Rinka never shouted at me once, but my mom does all the time. It doesn't make any sense.
People prejudice us often don't. We tend to fear things we know nothing about, which is why everybody is so wary of Rinka. If they spend a bit more time with her like you were, and they learned how kind she is, then they wouldn't be so cruel to her. It's their ignorance which makes them take against her.
Does that mean Rinka here didn't try and kill Mrs. Miyake's cat? I beg your pardon.
I beg your pardon? Did something happen to Komugi?
Yeah, she went missing last week. Mr. and Mrs. Miyake searched for her up and down the village and so did a bunch of other people, but they couldn't find her. It was like she vanished into thin air. Everybody started saying fluffy cat like Komugi couldn't disappear for she's too big.
She's rather rotund, yes.
The Miyaka's cat, Komugi, was well known in the village for being a portly creature. She had the habit of eating leftover cuts of meat the Miyaka's gave her, which had inflated her to almost comic proportions. Oh boy.
Somebody started saying that the demon in the Haruna household must have caught her, watched out for a walk, and torn her limb from limb like this.
Kanon made a particularly violent series of gestures with her hands, which made Rinka wince.
And broken her leg just like this, and drank her blood. That's what everybody was saying.
Oh my.
Masaomi frowned, one razor-ring hand still resting on Rinka's scalp.
That sounds rather violent.
That's what everybody thought happened. Demons are supposed to drink blood after all, and eat hearts and entrails and... I do know all sorts. I thought Rinka must have done too, everybody sounded so sure. But if you can't even kill spiders, I guess you probably couldn't kill a cat.
Kanon peered at Rinka curiously, who shook her head vigorously in response.
Well, that figures. I don't think you look like you could have killed or eaten a cat either. You're so scrawny, the cat probably would have scratched you. I think I know that cat for, did you say she was fluffy? Yeah, and real big. She's a huge puffy tail, and she's whiter than snow. Oh, I do know her then.
You do?
Masaomi looked at Rinka curiously. He had never seen her with any cat before, stray or otherwise, but he didn't exactly have his eyes on Rinka around the clock. It was possible she could have played with Komugi when Masaomi was still abed in the early hours. He had been finding it hard to wake up at sensible hour recently, owing to his hilarious ages... Why did I say hilarious? What is wrong with my reading today? Damn it! To his various aches and pains.
Yeah, I do. She comes to the garden sometimes to beg for food. She's been doing it for months.
Rinka tied to her sleeves, newly shy.
She stopped by only a couple of days ago, actually.
She did?
Rinka nodded while Kanon said,
Does that mean Komugi is alright then? She seemed alright to me. I think she just went for a stroll. The next time I see her, maybe I can ask Masaomi to try and catch her. Then we can give her back to the Miyakes, if they wouldn't mind. Oh, that's a good idea. I'm sure the Miyakes will be really happy. Hehe. Do you really think so? Sure, I mean, why wouldn't I be? They've been worrying a lot about Komugi. But she's been spending time in my garden with me and...
Rinka exhaled, her expression uneasy.
And people don't like me. What if I think that I kidnapped her? Or what if I think that I cursed her? Masaomi's old maid thought I was cursed, so she ran away. She said I was an omen of misfortune. The Miyakes might not want Komugi back if they find out about this. Oh yeah, that's a good point. People can be pretty suspicious.
Masaomi thought Kanon probably meant superstitious, but he didn't correct her. He knew from his years spent as an educator that she was exactly the sort of surly child who didn't appreciate being educated. Yeah, I understand that.
And I should know, my folks both run a shrine. Let's see then.
Kanon pondered, one hand beneath her chin, then said,
Ah! If you do find her, maybe you can give her to me, and I can save out here. Does that sound right? Oh yeah, I think that should be good. Let's do that then. I'll come back in a few days when I can find the time to see if you managed to catch Komugi. Mrs. and Mrs. Miyake will be real happy, hehe. I wonder if they'll give me a reward for finding her. Maybe they'll give me some spending money.
Hey now.
Masaomi frowned, not entirely enchanted by Kanon's mercantile attitude.
Handing Komugi back to the Miyakes is one thing, but do you not think it a touch unfair to take the credit for funding Komugi himself, yourself, and to claim a reward for it, no less? It would be dishonest.
I guess.
Canon frowned. She scuffed the ground with her sandal and said,
Alright. If Mr. and Mrs. Miyake give me some money, I can take it back here and split with you, Rinka. Maybe I can buy you some sweets. Isn't that kind of me?
Part of Masaomi wanted to question Kanon's so-called goodness. She had only made the offer because he had needled her into it, but Rinka didn't seem to care about the specifics. She was staring now, her eyes wide like rabbits.
Would you really buy me some sweets? Yeah, I can do some rice cakes, maybe, or some dango. It's really cute and colorful, and comes on little sticks. I like dango a lot. It's very sweet. You should try it too. Oh!
Rinka's eyes widened even further, her irises shining so brightly they might very well have contained within them whole galaxies.
I never had dango before. They sound really good. They are. They're super yummy, but I'm surprised. Hasn't Mr. Haruna ever bought you sweets before? He mostly feeds me rice and fish. He says sweets are bad for my teeth.
Canon pulled a face.
He sounds just as bad as my mother. She doesn't let me eat sweets either, but that sometimes buys me things behind her back. The dango will be real nice, I promise they will. You promise? Yeah, cross my heart. If I lie, I'll swallow 1,000 needles and all. Oh no! You don't want to do something like that! That sounds painful!
It's alright, Rinka. It's just a saying.
A saying? Yeah, I ain't really gonna swallow 1,000 needles, but I really will buy you those dango. Mr. Haruna's been holding out on you.
Well, I'm very sorry for caring about my daughter, Steve.
Ooh, he's calling her daughter, let's go, I'm glad. Masaomi frowned, feeling rather perturbed. What right did a whippersnapper like Canon have to lecture him about how to raise his own child? There was a reason why Masaomi did not like to feed Rinka sweets. They were lacking in nutrition, for one thing, and they were extortionately expensive for another. What? Wasn't there those sweets, super cheap sweets shop yet there? And there was a whole slew of practical concerns about Rinka's teeth. If Rinka had get toothache, it would be difficult for Masaomi to get a dentist to take a look inside of her mouth. I guess. Rinka's fangs were far sharper than an ordinary person's, and they would have scared most dentists away. Masaomi was trying to prevent a potential disaster while he had the chance. Canon, however, seemed not to care about the future. She was too young to consider all the possibilities and much too careless. Instead, she laughed.
Yeah, you're pretty funny, mister.
I am?
Yeah, of course you are. You've gotta be, to look after a demon.
Well,
Masaomi's expression relaxed upon hearing this clarification and he smiled.
you might have a point there.
I know I do. You and Rinka are both really funny, but I don't think you're bad. You seem real nice, actually. You're much nicer than my mother.
Wow.
Well, I do try.
You think I'm nice? Yeah, I think you're really nice. It's kinda sad that you aren't the scary demon I thought you'd be, but being a nice demon is kinda cool too. It is? Yeah, I've heard some stories about demons before and they're all really nasty. They live up in the mountains, but they come down every once in a while to kidnap children, eat pets, and cause all sorts of problems. That's what everybody always says. But I think it's much more interesting to find a demon who's friendly. You're not at all like the demons I've heard about. In fact,
Canon grinned widely enough that Masaomi could see she was missing one of her back teeth. He supposed it must have fallen out recently to make way for her adult teeth.
Since you are so nice, why don't we be friends? Do you really want to be my friend? Of course I do, silly. Or I wouldn't have offered. I'll have to come back later away to see if we manage to find Komugi, and then I'll have to hand her in and get my...
Canon caught Masaomi's ring eye and changed tack.
I mean, our reward. I've got to buy those dango for you, so I'll be back here a few times. We might as well be friends, right? I think it will make things much easier. Well, if that's your right. It's more than alright. I feel it'll be fun having a demon for friend. I don't know anybody else who can say that, heh? For now that I think about it, I don't think my mom or dad would be very happy if they knew I was playing with you. And I don't think Ayako or Misuzu or Misa would like it either. They might be a bit funny about it. I don't want to get into trouble, so I guess this will have to be our little secret. Secret?
Rinka's enthusiasm did not dissipate at this. If anything, she seemed even more excited than before, so much so she was practically vibrating. Older children might have taken umbrage at being kept a secret, as though they were something shameful, but Rinka must have been accustomed to it. She already spent the last year hidden away inside Masaomi's home, away from the prying eyes of the villagers. To her, this must have been more of the same, with a slight twist, of course. This time, Rinka wasn't keeping herself a secret for the sake of the villagers. She was keeping her friendship with Kanon a secret instead, and secrets shared between two people were always much more exciting than those kept to oneself.
That sounds like fun! I've never had any friends to keep secrets with. Unless Snowy counts, though I guess she's actually called Komugi. Anyway, I think that would be nice if you don't mind, Masaomi.
Rinka's enthusiasm was great enough that for a few moments she had forgotten Masaomi. She remembered him soon enough, however, glancing up at him guiltily.
Wouldn't be already gonna visit me.
Well... Masaomi frowned. He was unsure whether she really approved of Kanon. For such a young girl, she was awfully willful, and she was quite rude too. Hey, the smirk now. Her hammer of speaking, her hammer. Wow, again. My reading today is really bad. I must have slept bad. Her manner of speaking was even coarser than a lot of the boys in the village. It made quite the curious contrast when one saw how extravagant her kimono was, how neatly cut her hair. It was even stranger when Masaomi considered that she lived in the local shrine. Masaomi knew that Kanon was being trained by her exactly mother in the ways of being shrine maiden, and shrine maidens were supposed to be demure, elegant, and reserved. They certainly were not supposed to crawl through the hedges, go hunting for demons, or insult their elders. Kanon's behavior was completely inappropriate for a future shrine maiden, but perhaps that was why she acted out so much. She must have led a cloistered life. Masaomi knew Mrs. Wakabayashi in passing, and he knew she was a stern woman, a real stickler for the rules. She didn't let her daughters go to school. She didn't want them mixing with the village children, and instead educated them at home. Okay, fair enough. Kanon must, in her immature, childish way, have been rebelling against her overbearing mother. Fair enough. Masaomi could not fault her for that, and neither did he want to send her away. She was the first girl Rinka's age who had shown an interest in her. Masaomi didn't want Rinka to pick up bad habits, but perhaps she was a little too good for such a young girl. Every child deserves to get up to a bit of naughtiness every once in a while. It built character, and it would at least give Rinka something to do other than reading.
Alright then. You can come over if you want, I don't mind.
Alright, I knew you'd see it my way, hey. For such an old geezer, you ain't all that bad.
Now, let's not get carried away. This old geezer still has a few rules. I'll let you come and see Rinka on one condition.
Oh, and what's that, huh?
You have to promise not to hurt her. Do you think you can do that? I don't mind if you want to play, but don't push her over again. If you do, I'll be very, very cross, and I don't think you'd like me when I'm cross. Rinka might be a demon, but I was a teacher, and teachers are much, much scarier than demons.
Maybe. Alright. Once again, we are switching to Rinka's perspective, and we'll switch tomorrow. We'll see where this goes. Just like that. I think I told you this is like not as very short game this time around. Still, it's not like super massive, but well, we will be entering the 4th episode, so you get the idea. Man, I hope Canon will be actually like a good friend for Rinka. Would be nice, that's for sure. Definitely would be nice. Sure, her motive was just to see a demon, but you know, hopefully the two can get along. With that being said, hope you all get along with your peers. And if you've run into a demon, hopefully you could get along as well. Alright, let's end it. As usual, consider liking the video, consider subscribing as well if you have not done that yet, and of course, I wish you all a wonderful day. Bye bye.